Mr. Prime Minister, you've called repeatedly for PA President Abu Mazen to return to the talks. He's made clear that he has no intention to do so. So what's your next move? Are you considering unilateral steps, and what do you do to prevent Israel from becoming a binational state?
Well, first of all, you point correctly that he has refused to enter negotiations without preconditions. I've been Prime Minister on this rounds. This is my fourth term, so I've been Prime Minister now. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It requires some effort, but it's nice to have that recognized early in the morning here in Jerusalem. I've been Prime Minister, this is my fourth time, third consecutive term, and I have asked from day one to negotiate without preconditions with President Abbas. After all, our situation is complex, not easy to solve. On the one hand, I don't want a binational state. I don't want to govern the Palestinians. I let them rule themselves. On the other, I don't want to have territory that is in their power to be used as another state, the Iranian state, to attack Israel, as has happened in Gaza, as has happened in Lebanon after we left it. This requires an arrangement of arrangements of recognition, of demilitarization by us. I mean, I'm the foreign minister and I'm going out on a limb. I'm telling you, it's not going to be done by Austrian forces, okay? It's just not going to happen, okay? So the only force that can assure continuous demilitarization in the foreseeable future are the security forces of Israel, which is complicated, but essential. By the way, essential not only for our security, but essential also for Palestinian security. Because you saw what happens when we just walked away from Gaza. Militant Islam walked in, and Hamas, with the backing of Iran, kicked out the Palestinian Authority in no time. So we can't afford to let that happen. This is one of many issues that need to be negotiated. But we can't start the negotiations. In 7 years, in the last 7 years, Mr. Abbas has deigned to meet with me for less than 7 hours. Simply will not meet. Now, it used to be that, of course, we were accused of the lack of diplomatic progress because that's the automaticity that accompanies some of the diplomatic circles, particularly in Europe. But I think people are waking up to the fact that he won't negotiate. And because he won't negotiate, we can't get negotiated progress, and I think that's the essential format to do it. I have no preconditions for entering negotiations, but I have very solid principles with which to conclude negotiations. And the first thing is the Palestinians will have to finally recognize the Jewish state. They cannot ask for a nation state for themselves and not accord one to us. After all, we've only been here about 4,000 years, right? We have some connection to this land, to this city. 400 yards from here is David's city. In equal distance, this Temple Mount. It's named the Temple Mount because on this mount was a temple, the place where Abraham first visited. And Solomon built a temple. And Jesus overturned the money tables, money changers' tables on that temple. Okay? That is all of this from Solomon's time to the rise of Islam, preceded Islam by 1,500 years. Temple Mount. We have some connection, modest, to this land, to this city, to this mount. And yet we recognize that there is another people here, and we're willing to forge a peace. So we need to sit down and discuss the issues of mutual recognition and real security and demilitarization. And if we can't do that because of the persistent Palestinian refusal that is never admonished, by the leading forces of the international community, and therefore Abu Mazen has no incentive to enter negotiations. In the absence of that, then, look, we have three goals. One, political. Two, security. Third, prosperity. What we cannot do politically, we can at least do for security and prosperity, and we are doing it. I've not taken a toll on the Palestinian population in the recent actions. We've kept the workflow going. We didn't shut down the territories. We're doing everything in our power to target the Palestinian killers themselves. By the way, we're doing that rather successfully. There were 85 terror incidents with 95 terrorists participating in it. We killed or captured 89, that's nearly 100%, and we'll get the remaining.
Are you considering unilateral moves?
Well, unilateral moves in security and the economy are there. We're doing them. I prefer bilateral, I prefer negotiated moves. But in the aspects of security and the economy, there is room for it. Politically, I think it's more complicated and not desirable.
But if things stay stymied diplomatically, I mean, is there something that you will initiate?
Well, there are all sorts of unilateral moves in all sorts of directions. Wait and see. And they're not necessarily in the direction that people think.
Could you be a little specific?
No. No.
Mr. Prime Minister, talks about Syria's future have begun in Vienna. What does Israel want to emerge in Syria? Who are we rooting for? And is Russia's involvement there good or bad for Israel?
I'd like to see in Syria democratic, liberal, free enterprise, modest, Luxembourg. Of course, we'd like to see.
But short of that.
Humpty Dumpty being put together again and changing his nature, even then. I don't know if it could be put together again. I think that a big question remains. For the last 4 years, my policy has been not to intervene in the Syrian internal conflict, except on two things. The first thing has been to offer, and I think we were the first country on earth to offer humanitarian aid. I ordered the setting up of a field hospital about 10 yards from our border on the Golan Heights with Syria, and we took in thousands of Syrian casualties. It's not only men, it's women, it's children, it's amputees, it's you see them with the barrel bombs. I mean, it's quite astounding. They're treated by Israeli doctors or by Druze doctors and nurses, and they're absolutely amazed. They see, I talked to some of them, they see Israelis for the first time. They were indoctrinated that these are the devils, and the devils are like angels to them, giving them life, bringing them back to life. Of course, we don't photograph them, because if a picture, a photograph of these poor people is shown, and after recovery they're given passage back to Syria, they'll be executed on the spot. So they meet this clandestine Israeli kingdom of angels. We take them to our best hospitals, operate on them, and so on. That's the first thing that we did, a massive humanitarian effort. The second, in Syria itself, I made it clear that we will not tolerate the use of Syrian territory to attack our positions in the Golan or anywhere else in Israel, to form Iran's efforts to form a second front in the Golan, and we've taken action against that, against both. Or the transfer of particularly lethal weapons, let's call them game-changing weapons, from Syria to Lebanon. This has been our longstanding policy. We act on this policy. We don't always identify these game-changing weapons when they pass from Syrian territory, courtesy of, often of Iran, and always with Hezbollah doing the transport. And if we don't see it, we are not, we don't hesitate to degrade the stocks of the Syrian army of equal or similar weaponry. This is our policy. We keep it.
How about Russia? Good or bad for us?
First, I said this to President Putin when I met him in Moscow. I said, that's exactly what we're doing. And I have a suggestion. Let's make sure that our pilots don't shoot down each other, which I think is a sensible approach. And also, let's make sure that we're coordinated. Their air defenses, our air power. And so we did what is called deconfliction. I can't tell you what will be the outcome of the Russian involvement in Syria. It's too early to say. But I can tell you that I defined Israel's interests under any scenario. Whether a deal will be struck and implemented in Syria or not, that deal, if so implemented, must have Israel's interests at the table. And that means that we cannot accept a resolution in Syria that continues to enable Iran and Hezbollah to use Syria to attack Israel and to use Syrian territory as a passage for arms for another front in Israel against a Lebanese front against Israel. We will continue to defend our interests.